This is the story of a king who outlawed witchcraft across his whole kingdom, then crept into the dark to consult a witch himself. It's also the story of a Bible figure almost everyone recognizes by a name the Bible never actually gives her. Tonight we're investigating the Witch of Endor, a single seance buried in the Old Testament that has divided rabbis, church fathers, and theologians for roughly 2,000 years. And sorry, this isn't the Endor from Star Wars. Let's start with the part most people get wrong, which is the name itself. Open the Hebrew text of 1 Samuel chapter 28, and the word witch never appears. The woman gets described instead as a mistress of an Ob, and that one small word has frustrated translators for centuries. Ob can mean the spirit of a dead person, the practice of necromancy, the practitioner herself, or even a ritual pit dug into the ground to summon the dead. The scholar Harry Hoffner, comparing the term to other ancient Near Eastern languages, argued that it pointed to exactly that kind of ghost pit. Notice that witch isn't in any of those meanings. So where did the famous name come from? It traces back to the King James version of the Bible, though not to the verses you'd expect. The label lives in the chapter heading, the little summary the translators printed at the top of the page, never in the actual scripture beneath it. The International Standard Bible Encyclopedia makes the same point, noting that the phrase fills our literature yet never shows up in the English Bible's verse text. Inside those King James verses, she's called a woman who has a familiar spirit. The Greek Septuagint went a different direction entirely and named her a belly talker, meaning a ventriloquist. One header turned her into a witch, and that single word has shaped how people picture her ever since. With the name cleared up, the story itself comes into focus. The setting lands in the late 11th century before Christ, somewhere around 1010 to 1000 BCE by traditional dating, and it's worth saying plainly that no source outside the Bible even mentions King Saul, so those numbers stay estimates. Saul rules as Israel's first king, anointed by the prophet Samuel. Unfortunately, Saul has already lost God's favor through disobedience, and Samuel has warned him the kingdom will be torn away and handed to David. Things get worse when Samuel dies, which removes Saul's last real line to God right when he needs it most. On the eve of a massive battle with the Philistines, the king is terrified. The text says, God refused to answer him, by dreams or by prophets, leaving him in total silence with no guidance from any legitimate source. That's when Saul does something desperate and deeply hypocritical. He seeks out the help of a medium. Saul had banned mysticism and expelled the mediums and spiritists from Israel, in obedience to the law of Moses. Starved for answers, he disguises himself and rides out by night with two men to find one of the very people he outlawed. The woman he tracks down lives at Endor, a village in the Jezreel Valley. She's also nobody's fool. When this stranger asks her to summon a spirit, she hesitates, fearing a trap set by the king who criminalized her craft, and only proceeds after Saul swears an oath that no punishment will touch her. She calls up the spirit of Samuel, and the instant she sees him, she shrieks and turns on her customer with the words,
"Why have you deceived me? You are Saul."
Saul asks what she sees, and her answer is one of the eeriest lines in the whole passage.
"I see a god coming up out of the earth."
Then comes the description.
"An old man is coming up, and he is wrapped in a robe."
That robe carries weight because it echoes an earlier line where Saul tore Samuel's robe, and Samuel declared the kingdom would be ripped from him the same way. So the garment instantly signals both the prophet's identity and his judgment. The apparition speaks first, with a complaint.
Why have you disturbed me by bringing me up?
Then the prophecy arrives like a verdict.
The kingdom belongs to David now. Israel will fall in battle.
And the line that lands hardest of all.
Tomorrow, you and your sons will be with me.
Saul crumples to the ground in terror. What happens next is the strange, human turn in the story. Because this outlaw, this enemy of the crown who just heard the king sentenced to death, chooses to show him kindness. She slaughters a fattened calf, bakes bread, and persuades the broken king to eat before he walks back out into the night. Scholars read that meal two ways. Many see genuine compassion. Alternatively, the scholar Pamela Tamarkin Rice argues it's shrewd self-preservation from a clever, capable woman protecting herself, or perhaps she is simply offering a sacrifice to the spirits of the dead. Either way, the occult practitioner becomes the one who offers mercy. The next day, the prophecy proves true, and Saul and his sons die at Mount Gilboa. The Book of Chronicles later states it bluntly, that consulting that medium counted among the reasons Saul died. That settles the events, but it leaves the question that has never been put to rest, which is who, or what, actually appeared that night. 3 answers have fought it out for 2 millennia. The first holds that it truly was Samuel, raised by God's permission rather than the woman's power. The second insists it was a demon impersonating Samuel. The third, the skeptical view, calls the whole thing fraud, a trick. The lineup of who believed what turns genuinely fascinating. Writing in the 2nd century, Justin Martyr declared it really was Samuel because he leaned on the story as proof that the soul survives death, and Origen agreed the prophet truly appeared. Tertullian pushed back hard, calling it a demonic impersonation, since he refused to believe a demon could drag up the soul of a real prophet, and Gregory of Nyssa landed in the same place with a demon in disguise. Eustathius of Antioch felt strongly enough to write an entire treatise built specifically to refute Origen. Augustine threaded the needle, leaning towards Samuel while still condemning the necromancy itself. The Reformers split just as sharply. Martin Luther dismissed the figure as the devil's ghost, and John Calvin thought that it was not the real Samuel but a specter. Catholic and Orthodox traditions today generally hold that Samuel did truly appear, accomplished by God's own action instead of the medium's. Plenty of Protestants agree it was Samuel, while others stand firm that it was a demon, which means the debate is still wide open after all these centuries. Before we close, let's step into the stranger territory, and I want to be completely clear that everything in this next part is fringe. None of it reflects mainstream scholarly or religious thinking, and I'm including it only because people genuinely run into these claims. Start with the ancient astronaut reading. Writers in the tradition popularized by Eric von Daniken's book, Chariots of the Gods, reinterpret Old Testament supernatural events as encounters with extraterrestrial technology, and the Endor story sometimes gets folded right in. The honest verdict is that mainstream archaeologists and historians reject this entirely, and von Daniken has admitted fabricating elements of his work. Esoteric and occult readings take a different angle, recasting the medium as a positive symbol of feminine spiritual power. 19th century spiritualists went further still, pointing to this story as biblical proof that mediumship is real, and one spiritualist paper in 1875 even called her more Christ-like than her critics, a claim mainstream Christian and Jewish authorities reject outright. Rudyard Kipling answered that whole impulse with a famous poem titled Endor, written after he lost his son in the First World War, a furious warning against spiritualists preying on grieving people, with the line, "Oh, the road to Endor is the oldest road, and the craziest road of all." Which brings us back to where we started. The Witch of Endor isn't really the story of a witch at all. It's the story of a desperate king who abandoned his own principles, bypassed every honest path, and went hunting for answers in the one place he had forbidden, only to find a sentence already written against him. The woman that history keeps calling a witch is never named, never called a witch in the actual text, and arguably the only person in the room who showed the doomed king any kindness. It stands as one of the most misunderstood stories in the entire Bible, and its biggest question, who spoke to Saul in that dark room, is one the greatest minds in history could never agree on. You've now heard the evidence, and the verdict is yours to weigh in the comments below.